Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cutler, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
For those sitting here live, here in Cary, as well as anyone listening all over the world, it is a pleasure to have you with us. If you are listening, let us know. Write your name in the chat box. Feel free to ask questions. We'll try to include it as part of the program.
Cheryl is in the chat.
Who is? Say it again.
Cheryl.
Cheryl, fantastic. And I want to mention Hal is having a little procedure today, Hal, so we asked that the learning today should be in a marriage for a very speedy recovery to Elihu ben Eileen. Once we mentioned blessing and learning, the learning, and it should also be blessing for Debbie, the Barachaya Bas Nechama, for speedy recovery. Amen. All right. What's the relationship between Jews and food? Loaded question. Jews like food.
Eat, don't eat.
Right. You're either always eating or don't eating. Or only eating this and not that. Or eating in this place and not that. That's Sukkot, eating in the Sukkah. It is interesting.
Well, and also we not only have a lot of specific rules like that, but we also have a lot of tradition.
Correct.
That are not rule-based, but cultural tradition.
So it's a very, yeah.
Well, there's the old saying, all the Jewish holidays, they try to kill us, they didn't, let's eat.
Exactly. So where did that come from? I mean, so there's two parts. There's as you said, I like that distinction, Brian. There's clearly the Torah, and then there's just all the culture. And I guess every culture has a lot of food, but there does seem to be a love affair of Jews and food. And it's interesting to see where that comes from and the right perspective, how to look at it in a holy way. Because obviously everything can either be used for the good or the not good. So we're going to address that a little bit today by looking at a mitzvah in this week's Parsha that I don't think we've ever discussed here before. It has to do with kosher, but not the regular kosher laws. Let's begin. Text 1, and you want to begin?
When the Lord your God expands your boundary as he has spoken to you, and you say, I will eat meat because your soul desires to eat meat, you may eat meat according to every desire of your soul. If the place the Lord your God chooses to put his name there will be distant from you, you may slaughter of your cattle and of your sheep, which God has given you, as I have commanded you, and you may eat in your cities according to every desire of your soul.
Right. Now, later in the Parsha, there's the laws of kosher and whatnot, but the Jews here are, so to speak, given permission to eat meat. But before this, they weren't allowed to eat meat.
No, not really, because the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden, they didn't eat meat.
So it says that it was only after the flood where Noah was first licensed to eat meat. They were vegetarians at the beginning. Yes. If you notice the command to Adam and Chava, it talks about being able to eat from all the vegetation and all the fruits. After Noah leaves the ark, he's told he's allowed to. So what is at this point where when you go to the land of Israel and you're going to have big borders, it could be a country the size of New Jersey, a little bit bigger, and you guys say, hey, I want to eat meat, because your soul desires to eat meat, for another topic. It's a very interesting wording over here. Yeah, it seems to denote that eating meat is not the same as eating everything else. It's your soul desires to eat meat. But you would think it would be the animal soul, not the... So it associates it with a desire, almost as if this is not necessary for survival. And let's not get into Judaism, vegetarianism. That's a whole nother topic. Those that advocate being vegetarians will often point to this verse because it says the word desire. Does that denote something positive or negative? It's almost like, all right, if you guys want to do it, I'll allow you because you desire it. But certainly, if you look at other places in the Torah, we're allowed to eat meat for another topic. So it says you're allowed to. You're allowed to. What changed? So interesting, at least according to one opinion in the Talmud, I want to just paraphrase this text too. Up until that point, any time they wanted to eat meat, it had to be in the context of sacrifice. Very interesting. There was no little shochet slaughter doing their own little business. Anytime they wanted to eat meat, what would they do? They would have to go to the tabernacle. In those days, they didn't have a temple yet. Part of it would go to the priest, and part of it, and then they would have a little barbecue themselves. So that's what this verse says, according to Rabbi Shmuel, only when you go into the land of Israel. And then, not everyone is going to be living next door to the place that my name will be, which is where?
The temple.
Eventually, Jerusalem, not yet given a name in this verse, interesting, because it didn't immediately start at Jerusalem. It was in a few other stations before that. Okay. But eventually, I'll have a capital, and you might be living far away from that capital, in which case, you don't have to come to Jerusalem every single time you want to have some chicken nuggets, every single time you want to have a barbecue, and you are welcome to do it at your house. Interesting. I don't know if you've noticed that. It continues, however, just one thing to be super careful about. Text 3, Barbara. This is a continuation. Yeah.
However, be strong not to eat the blood, for the blood is the soul, and you shall not eat the soul with the flesh.
And the words in Hebrew are very strong. Chazak. We use that same word when we finish one of the books of the Torah, and we say, be strong, chazak, chazak. So I don't know of another mitzvah in Torah where it tells us we need to be strong in the observance of this mitzvah. Very odd.
I mean, that's
wording.
like suggesting that you really want blood, and you have
so
and you have to actively resist it. And further, this mitzvah goes and gives reasoning.
So that's what we're going to dive into today. I don't think we've ever discussed this mitzvah before, eating blood. Now you say, who is going to eat blood? Well, apparently they did it back then, right?
And very
And
rare
B
meat
is,
is
and
blood.
B is, this is the source for why kosher meat is so expensive. Because what happens when you have kosher meat, after it's slaughtered, first of all, they go through a very laborious process of getting out the blood. Begins with soaking. They soak the meat for a period of time to soften it up. Then they salt it with thick salt called kosher salt. This is it's funny how many people think kosher salt means the salt is kosher.
Right.
All salt is kosher.
It's the grain size.
Kosher salt means salt that is used to kosherize meat. You not know that before? It's interesting. It's that's what kosher salt means. Thick salt that is used, so you spread it on all sides of the meat, and then afterwards you rinse it off. And it takes a lot of time to do this process, which is one of the things that drive up the price of kosher meat. The second, of course, is the slaughter. And the third is that there's a good percentage of the animals that are not found to be kosher because it has to be examined afterwards. And if there are certain health blemishes in the animal, it's not kosher. Even though for the FDA, that might not be a big deal. For the kosher laws, it is. They have to sell it on the secondary market. They sell it at a loss, driving up the price.
So you can put that salt on a piece of pork chop and fix it?
No.
Trace meat?
If only. They are specific. They are separate mitzvot. One is later in this parsha which animals are kosher. Then the parsha tells us you have to slaughter animals. Interesting about the slaughtering. It's one of the mitzvot that show very clearly and point to the existence of an oral tradition. Because the verse actually says you should slaughter the animals as I have commanded you. And if you scan all 5 books of the Torah, guess what you will not find? Any mention of the laws of slaughtering. So what does it mean, as I've commanded you? It must be that outside of the 5 books of Moses, there was an oral tradition how the slaughtering should take place. So A is the type of animal, B is the way it's slaughtered, but C is be careful not to eat the blood. And it's a very strong wording. It's interesting that the famous trial that happened in what year was it? 1911 in Russia, one of the last blood libels. Familiar with which one I'm referring to? Mendel, the name just escaped me right now. Bayless. There was a blood libel. In 1911, there was a Ukrainian boy who disappeared on his way to school, and they found him killed in a cave somewhere in town. And immediately there was evidence that there was a certain person in town that did it. She was upset because that boy snitched on her for something else. But then afterwards, that was what the local Kiev police department suspected. But the Russian government under the Tsar then turned this into like a mafia committed crime and accused the Jews of doing it because they said, this is in 1911. They said they would
Use the blood.
use
for
the blood
matzahs.
for matzah or other things. And they accused a Jew of doing it, and the entire Jewish community, got together and had a fierce defense, hired this renowned attorney, Oscar Grusenberg, and in the middle of his defense, he says, a Jew and blood? Could there be anything further from one? Even when it comes to the way we eat, we have to make sure salted and soak it. When we have eggs, there's a tradition that we check the eggs to make sure there's no blood spots. How? And that was it made a very strong impression on everyone. And in the end, he was acquitted. But it was a very famous trial because it's relatively recent in history. Okay, in any event, the Torah tells us, be careful not to eat the blood. This mitzvah is repeated 4 times in Torah. 4 different times. Because of time, I don't want to go through them all. Look at text 4. This is an eternal statute. You shall not eat any blood.
Oh, and also fat.
So, this word for fat, you have to look at the Hebrew. Chalev, it's not all fat. It's a certain part of fat that is not eaten. They carve it off in kosher meat today.
Oh, what is
Chalev.
Like the fat on the organs?
It's a
Or
certain,
or-
maybe someone can, there are forbidden fats. I'm not familiar with what it is. So there was a certain type of forbidden fat. It does not mean all. Yeah. Okay. I should also note that once someone soaks and salts and does all that, from that point on, it's good to go. So even if you like your meat a little bit rare, and there seems to be a little bit of red liquid when it's cooked, at that point in time, it's not problematic anymore. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
You know how the Muslims, I don't know if you know, but anyhow, how they slaughter and then hang it from a tree to drain all the blood. Does that truly drain all the blood? It doesn't seem as though it must.
I'm not familiar with the
Well,
Does it
yeah,
make
one
sense?
second, I'm not.
Does it make sense? Abdominal fat?
Is that what the chalev, the word in Hebrew is chalev, not chalav, but
I
chalev?
understand. Chalev.
It's a
and
certain type of fat, and I'm not familiar.
a form of animal fat, only the chalev of animal that are the sort of which offering can be bought in the tabernacle.
Okay.
The prohibition of eating chalev is also in addition to the Torah, one of the commandments that so here
Does it describe where? I'm just going to turn the AC. Does it describe
That's-
where on the animal it is?
yeah, the only reason I'm saying abdominal because the first result says jump to abdominal fats,
All right.
and so I'll keep
all
going,
right.
keep going, and I'll
All
I
right.
think it's
All right.
definitive what the answer is.
So we have this mitzvah, the next one, a few chapters later in Vayikra, for regarding the soul of all flesh, the blood is the soul. Damo, its blood is binafsho, and its nefesh. You shall not eat the blood of any flesh. And then a fourth one as well, you shall not eat any blood, you shall spill it on water. There's another interesting tradition. Maybe, and this is, we don't hang it on trees, but there is a tradition that when we slaughter a bird
okay, yeah.
or a deer, they spread a little bit of dust on the blood after they kill it as well, also having to do with this.
It's the fat.
In any event,
It's the fat found.
this is a mitzvah. Jews have been doing this forever. Text 6 is from the
Rabbi, it's the
Fat
fat
found?
found on the stomach, kidneys, and liver.
Okay. Okay.
Fatty liver disease.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Amnon.
you.
In any event, yeah, not regular fat, you don't have to worry. And once you buy kosher meat that has a supervision on it, you can safely know that it has already been soaked and salted and whatnot. In the old days, things were different.
Yeah, yeah.
You brought your chicken to the local slaughter. Those were not that long ago, and they would, mommy would come home with the chicken, and she would have to take off the feathers herself, and people in their own homes would learn how to get the blood out. Yeah, there is another way of doing it as well through broiling, but in any event, yes.
It says slaughter, you have to do that. So if a community was starving and they came across an already deceased animal that didn't look diseased, they couldn't do anything with it?
So again, if it was literally life and death, kosher laws, like any other laws in Torah, except for what we call the big three, are overridden. But in any other,
if you're hungry,
yeah,
that's not enough.
but hungry, that is not enough. And in fact, because it was not slaughtered in the right way.
Wasn't there an ethical thing about eating those people, the ones that crashed and they had to eat somebody else, a person, they had to eat human because they crashed in the Andes, or I don't know if you remember.
Jewish? I'm not familiar.
I don't know if they were
Top of the
Jewish
mountain.
actually, but they were
They were just students.
they were plane crash and survivors. They had nothing. They were in the middle of the snow.
Weren't they a soccer team or something?
From
Yeah.
Argentina or something.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar.
they were on top of the
These are
Andes. And
Tough times.
tough times. When there's biblical stories, there are biblical stories, and we have this even in the Torah during the siege of Jerusalem when hunger was on the highest levels. You have this as well, but yes, the
On the
question.
way over from here, over to here, I heard people talking about Syria and what is happening is they're starving to death. I don't know if there's any Jews there, but and
Not a
that's-
Jews.
Yeah, they were. I don't know if they're. But that would be, but these are real issues. They were observant Jews in the Holocaust. Unfortunately, these questions that you're asking are not only theoretical, but many times in history, this came up by Jews who observed kosher and were in horrific situations in Russia in the Holocaust. And there's actually responsa. Responsa means letters that were sent to leading rabbis that we have today during the times of Holocaust, where these sorts of ethical dilemmas came up. So there's books written from leading rabbis during the Holocaust. Or another horrible example would be if God forbid, the Nazis came to a group of Jews, either you give up this person or we will kill the whole group. Do you give up that person? All these sorts of dilemmas that came up are discussed in a book. In any event, we should never know of such things.
Yeah, tough reading.
Yes. Let's go back to our issue. Our issue is we have to get rid of the blood. In the Code of Jewish Law, Text 6, it tells us how that's done. Let's do this briefly. Text 6, please.
Before salting the meat, it must be cleansed very well with water. We soak the meat in water for approximately half an hour. If a spot in the meat is found with blood that has clotted due to impact, that part must be cut and removed before the soaking. Salt must be strewn over all sides of the meat or fowl so that no spot remains without salt. It should rest in the salt for an hour. After that period, the salt must be cleaned off well, and the meat is then cleansed in water 3 times very thoroughly.
That's how you do it. Now, I've never,
You never did
thank
it?
God, no, I have done it once. I have done it. What I was going to say is I am not able to compare the taste of kosher meat and not kosher meat, so I don't know if kosher meat is typically saltier. I don't know the answer to that.
I do.
It's not. Okay.
It's not.
It's interesting. I wonder. In any event, what are our questions here? What are our questions when we read this?
Well, the part about the blood being clotted on impact.
Where do you see that?
Yeah, that was in the first
Found
paragraph.
that blood is
If a
clotted
spot-
due to
Oh,
impact.
interesting. Okay, that's okay. We'll leave that to the shochtim. We're not gonna to the slaughters. I'm
Is
not
that like somebody hit him with a, no, but they wouldn't have hit him with a.
No, that would be like if the animal has a bruise.
the bruise.
A bruise.
Interesting. So we're saying that the salt would not be sufficient, apparently, to take it off in that spot.
It's saying
Putting
that-
aside the details, what are our questions on this general mitzvah? people
Why?
raise the
Why?
why. Well, first of all, why? And every mitzvah we know begins with because that's what God says. However, as you pointed out, Brian, the Torah does say something here. Hadam hu hanefesh. Blood is the soul. The Torah itself seems to suggest some sort of reason. So why? What does that mean? And I guess our second question is, what in heaven's name does it mean when the Torah has to warn us, chazak, be strong? So those are our two questions going into our next section. Let us now continue with the way some of the classic commentators address this chazak. So Nachmanides, living in the 1200s, asks, what is the chazak? What is the strengthening all about? Judy, want to read? Text 7.
Sure. Why is it necessary to employ strength and fortitude to restrain from blood? It would seem more appropriate to use language such as, be cautious to refrain from eating blood, to convey its severity.
Right.
We find the expression of strengthening with regard to mitzvot, as God said to Joshua, only be very strong and fierce to keep and do as all that has been commanded unto you in the Torah by Moses,
Hold it there.
my servant.
The only other place the Torah says chazak in terms of a mitzvah is not one mitzvah. It's in general observance of mitzvahs. Is someone at the door? You can come in. It's in general when it comes to observance of mitzvahs, you have to be careful, strong to keep all the mitzvahs. But what does it mean when it comes to this particular mitzvah when the Torah says chazak? That's our question. Come sit down. So this is the question that Nachmanides asks. What do you think it denotes? What do you think it denotes? If the Torah says be strong not to eat blood, what does that seem to suggest?
That it was a habit in the community.
Exactly. So Rashi immediately picks up on that, and he writes, and he brings a argument in the Talmud. What's up with be strong? Brian, text 8.
From the wording be strong, i.e. resist temptation, one can deduce that the Jews were steeped in blood consumption. Therefore, it is necessary to state be strong. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon, the son of Azai, however, says, Scripture comes only to caution you and to instruct you as to what extent you must be steadfast in fulfilling the commandments. If regarding blood, which is easy to watch out for, as a person has no desire for it, the Torah needed to strengthen you with its abomination. Admonition, thank you. How much more so one must strengthen oneself for all the other commandments.
So in the Talmud, there's a debate. One opinion says, why does the Torah say be strong to eat blood? Apparently, everyone loved eating blood. The second opinion says, no one likes eating blood. But if, when it comes to an easy mitzvah, the Torah says chazak, how much more so the Torah is trying to say we have to always be on the lookout for strengthening ourselves in the observance of mitzvah. What is odd about this debate is as follows. Typically in the Talmud, people can argue about what the rule is, what the halacha is, what defines blood, but they don't argue on a fact. And it's actually a rule for those that have studied Talmud before. You should not have a machloket b'mitziut. You can have an argument on reality. And in the Talmud, typically you don't have an argument on, was it this way or was it that way? They're not arguing on a fact. So this is odd. This argument in the Talmud is odd because two sages are arguing whether or not people like blood or they didn't like blood. Okay, that's it.
Could you imagine in the desert you maybe had to drink blood?
There's water. They had the well of Miriam, the Torah says. There was water. So
Could it be another explanation for blood? There's got to be another.
we're going to go there.
Okay.
We're taking it one step at a time. But this is what Rashi denotes. Now, because of time here, is there any way to show, this is a little Talmudic over here, how can you say that these two people are actually not arguing in reality?
Because it's probably true that everybody has a desire for or doesn't have a desire for blood, and it's a function. If you are what you eat and you're eating the blood, then you become more desirous of it.
So we're going to get there in a moment. What do you think in those days eating blood was related to? It says some of the pagan cults did it.
Sacrifice and all that religion stuff.
Correct. There was a lot of
Idol
cults and idol worship and all sorts of strange pagan worship that was very much associated with eating blood. So Maimonides and others says that one of the most simplest reasons for this is to steer the Jews away from idolatry, because that was a pagan worship. So actually, the two may not be contradictory. On one hand, they may not have liked blood. On the other hand, they were still steeped in it. Why? Because that was the culture at the time. So that is one way to reconcile between the two.
I find that an easier reconciliation than some of the other ideas would be.
Yeah,
Correct.
because the same
Okay.
thing could be used for wine. Same argument. I mean, wine is used for.
Yeah, but
all
wine's a
the-
little well, wine's a
No,
little
why do we
more
drink
enjoyable.
Wine, then? Why do we
Yeah,
drink? We
a lot
shouldn't
of
be able to
children,
drink wine
It's
either.
very, it's very, it probably has a lot to do with addiction, the more you have of it.
So that's what the Rebbe suggests. Go to text 10 for a moment. We're going fast because of time. The Rebbe says this is not necessarily, why don't we do this next text? Why don't you read it out loud?
This is not a dispute regarding facts, for it is entirely possible that a person not desires something, and even to be repulsed by it, and nonetheless be steeped in its consumption for a different technical reason. In our case, out of the belief that it has benefits or healing properties.
Healing or crazy stuff. So people in those days did it. That is the first explanation. Nachmanides writes, we don't have to search very far for the reason for this mitzvah. 11b, Nachmanides. Yes, please read. Page 142.
Okay. It seems to me that the Torah made mention of strength regarding the prohibition of blood because of the fact that they were attached to blood in Egypt.
Oh, you know what? Sorry, a little 142.11b. Let's do. Sorry.
The following can be suggested with regard to the prohibition of consuming blood.
No, that's 12.
11. Sorry.
No worries.
Not that this is the main reason for forbidding consuming blood, for the verse here states the reason because the blood is
So we're searching for a reason here, a reason there. The Torah actually gives a reason. The blood is in the soul. But what does that mean?
That doesn't explain why you need to have strength.
Mm.
Okay, that explains
That is
why
true.
you should not do it.
Correct. Good.
Rabbi, are we talking about the strength when you slaughter?
No.
Okay.
Strength is in self-control.
Okay.
Strength is in care and making sure we do not violate this mitzvah. And the Torah uses a very strange expression. So the Chinuch writes as follows. The Chinuch, so the first reason is it was related to idolatry, right? So there's two different issues, the strengthening and the reasons. But the first reason is it was related to idolatrous practices.
It says it on 11a.
Okay. we
About the
skipped that one.
demon, yeah.
The demons and all sorts of pagan
Yeah.
stuff.
We
Even
went to
today, I believe there's certain cult groups that might do that kind of stuff. Reason number 2 is the verse says the blood is related to the soul. What would that mean? So one of the explanations is, and this is well known, we talked today about you are what you eat, right? And what we eat enters our bloodstream, and the physical characteristics of that affect who we are. So spiritually, Nachmanides and others mention that same idea. What we eat affects what we are. And therefore, the Chinuch text 12.
The following can be suggested with regard to the prohibition of consuming blood. Consuming blood can bring one to acquire cruel character traits. If doing so would mean that the human not only consumes a being that lives in a body like himself, but actually consumes the part within that being that its life literally depends on, and to which soul is bound. For it is known that animals have a soul, which the sages have named the sentient soul. That it is only sentient but not intellectual, as opposed to the human soul.
Okay, so there's still a hierarchy. However, animals are living beings. They have a nefesh. That's the word in Hebrew. Nefesh chayunit, a invigorating soul. And therefore, it's one thing to eat it. It's something else to eat the part of it that is most related to the soul. And the Torah associates blood and soul together. So therefore, there's a certain separation we need between eating the animal. And when the Torah tells us the blood is in the soul, it's like, don't go that far. Eat the animal, don't eat the blood is in the soul is in the blood. Okay.
Isn't it also that we're not supposed to eat some certain birds of prey because we were acquired that trait of preying on others?
So Nachmanides writes that if you look, usually amongst the kosher animals, they typically are herbivores and they're more gentle and so on and so forth. He writes that. And he writes that if you look at the birds of prey, they are not kosher. So this is a reason that's given post facto. It's not the main thing, you know. I think I probably said this story before, but right when Jews came to America, there was doubt over the nature of our good friend the turkey. And there was one Jewish family that saw a turkey attack another bird and said, that ain't kosher. We ain't eating that, no matter what other people say. And up until today, descendants of that individual don't eat turkey. The Wolf family. It's a certain family, yeah. In any event.
And their name is Wolf?
Not all wolves, but many wolves say, oh, that was good. That was good, Judy. That was quick. They're descendants of a certain person. In any event, returning to this issue, the second reason is there's something about the blood that's related to animalistic tendencies and cruelty, and we don't want to internalize that. So we have two reasons so far. Idolatry, cruelty. Now we're going to go for the third, okay? And the third really takes us to where I started today, the relationship between Jews and food. You know, food's such a funny thing. It's meant to survive. I always find it amazing when Yom Kippur, you finally are allowed to break your fast, and at least for me, have a little bit, just a little bit, and all of a sudden all my life comes back to me. It's like, that's all it took, you know? And it gives you this perspective of what food really is. You know, at that point, you don't care so much about what it is. All you need is, I want to feel back to myself. And whenever I have that moment, it's like, that's all I really need, you know? So obviously, we are supposed to eat in order to live, not live in order to eat. It's a big difference, you know? The emphasis is on living, serving God, doing mitzvot in the world, and it takes food to do that. But it says in books of Kabbalah and Hasidus, when it discusses the four kingdoms, and what I mean by four kingdoms is, at least in Jewish tradition, it talks about the inanimate kingdom, which would be minerals, the vegetable kingdom, the animal, and the humans. So four kingdoms, okay? And it says the nature of each one is to be consumed the one higher than it. That's what it discusses. Text 144, this is a Jewish text that writes, Dennis, yeah, please.
13.
Yeah, please, let's do 13.
Every creature is, plants are sustained by the inanimate, for they feed from the earth. Animals are sustained from plants. The deeper category are sustained by animals.
Right, obviously you can skip a level also, and we can eat minerals and we can eat vegetables. Now, what is the meaning of that statement? The meaning of that statement is, ideally, this is important, when we eat something from one of the lower categories and we use it for the right reasons, what do? You elevate it, okay? And I say, importantly, you do it for the right reasons. Because if you don't, then I can ask you what makes you any different from the lower category. And I'll put it this way. We said the four kingdoms, inanimate, vegetable. So if you ask someone, hey, why are you eating? Oh, just eating for no reason, you know, just got like food. What makes you any different than the inanimate? If someone says, I gotta grow, what's your response? What makes you any different from the plants? If someone says, I gotta have energy, you can ask the question, what makes you different from the animal kingdom? Someone says, I have a mission to accomplish in the world. I have good things to do today. And this gives me koyach, this gives me strength. Now you've truly elevated it to the level of human because it's uniquely human. So when we say elevating it to a higher category, we don't just mean that happens automatically. That happens when that which you are doing are uniquely human. And therefore, food could be, and in Kabbalah works, it discusses at great length, a means of elevation. And now using it, we're eating bagels around a Torah class, right? And we have a Shabbos meal, or we need koyach to do good work in the world, we've now elevated it. Okay.
But Rabbi,
Go tell the, what, yeah.
In order to elevate it, you have to say the bracha. You have to do the bracha before, and you have to thank a God afterwards too. Otherwise, you haven't really elevated.
So in
it.
order to elevate it, there needs to be mindfulness. Elevate, and it's that way with everything in the world. I'll take a step back. You know, Judaism is, on one hand, very spiritual, Torah, wisdom. On the other hand, we engage with the real world and the physical world all the time. That's part of being a Jew, making the world a better place. We're always, though, in this balance. When we try to elevate something, we try to make it holier, the question always is, are we raising it up, or is it, well, not raising, schlepping us down? It is that way with everything. Food happens to be the best example that I know of, because we're always doing it. And it's very simple. Am I raising it up, or is it schlepping me down? And therefore, as you said, there's a program in place how we are able to do it. One is saying a bracha. A bracha is mindfulness. A bracha is recognizing that this was created by God and had its own purpose. And now you are asking God Almighty permission to take it in. And that alone is supposed to mean I'm doing it for the right reasons. I'm not overeating. This is the right thing to eat. I have work I have to do in the world. And look, if only I was always on this level. If only all my blessings had that level of kavanah. It doesn't. But that's what a blessing is supposed to be. So there's so much in place about this. When we eat and then we study Torah, we do a mitzvah afterwards. That food is now schlepped along. That food is now schlepped along. So now let's do text 145, and the Rebbe gives the spiritual meaning of not eating blood. Okay. Where are we up to?
We're up around.
Rand, 145, we're skipping to 15. Now this is a talk of the Rebbe. Yeah.
Regarding the reason for forbidding the consumption of blood, the verse explains, because the blood is the soul. Commentaries explain that though the soul pulses through the entire body of the animal, nonetheless there is a difference between the flesh in which the soul is merely found and the blood, which is the soul itself. Everything digestible consumed by man becomes a part of his blood and flesh. Therefore, the nature of the foods that one consumes becomes entrenched within him. When one eats the flesh as opposed to the blood of a kosher animal, the soul of the animal is not so dominant within it, minimizing the impact of the animal's soul on the human consumer. In addition, the flesh must be chewed, digested, and transformed until it is absorbed into the blood and flesh of the person, further preventing the animal's very soul from entering the person. However, when a person eats blood, which does not require digestion, as does meat and the like, by consuming the blood, which is the soul of the animal, the nature of the animal will attach itself to the soul of the human, corrupting the person to become as coarse as the soul.
So the Rebbe is giving a Kabbalistic meaning to the souls in the animal. You need to be on top of the animal to elevate it. But by eating the essence of an animal, you become an animal. You're no longer on top of it. And that is what the Torah is suggesting. It did not suggest. The Torah is telling us when it says the blood is in the animal. The soul is in the blood. So I think this message, just to review, we had 3 different perspectives on not eating blood: idolatry, cruelty, and this last one, in order to elevate it, you must be above it. But that last piece has ramifications far beyond eating in every part of our life. For me, as a phone addict sometimes, this is what I ask myself: am I controlling it, or is it controlling me? And I stop myself sometimes, and I need to stop myself. And if I do something mindlessly, it's controlling me. That is my litmus test that it has me. It's no longer a tool for me to do good work in the world. It's schlepping me down. I'm not raising it higher. And it's that way with so many other things. There's so many beautiful things that can be outlets. Outlets are good things. We all need outlets in life. To be in a better mood, to be able to get back to ourselves, to do good work in the world. But sometimes an outlet becomes, gets in the way. So there's so much in the world that can be in the middle, and being a Jew means keeping balance. That's what it means, balance, in which we are supposed to live enjoyable, happy, productive lives. We're not ascetics, where we go away from the physical. No, but we have to have that balance And the class ends actually, and I'm just going to paraphrase it, with a few other areas in Jewish tradition where we see this idea. Text 16 says, it's from the sages, but one should pray before they eat breakfast. Okay? One should daven in the morning before eating breakfast. Why? It's the same idea. I don't immediately start my day eating. I gotta eat. But first tend to my spiritual needs, then I'll tend to my physical needs. Now, what's interesting, it says, is if you are eating in order to have a little bit of strength in order to pray better, then as there's a famous Hasidic expression, it's better to eat to daven than to daven in order to eat. It's a Hasidic expression. So, however, that doesn't mean a full breakfast, but that's why if you want to eat a little bit something before you say your prayers in the morning, that's good because it gives you strength. But you should hold off on the larger meal before you pray because we start off the day with our spiritual needs. We want to set the hierarchy from the beginning of the day. So that is one way we see that. The second is text 17, a beautiful text. Why don't you read, Barbara?
3 who ate on one table and spoke words of Torah. It is as if they ate from the table of God.
Okay, and this is also an ethics of our fathers, this same expression. That by taking a dinner table and elevating it with positive talk, instead of politics, celebrity gossip, or the like, you have now taken that and you've elevated it. So that's a second way of doing that. And the third is something that the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya when we have an intense desire to eat something. There's value in holding off even for a moment. Holding off a few moments. It's a certain self-control. That's what he writes. He says, even if it's for a short time, if the intent is, you know what, I want to subdue the other side. I have an animal inside of me, it needs to be fed, but you know what? I want to just show it, it's okay that I can wait a few moments. It says there's value to that as well. And all of this is the same idea. Training ourselves to keep the right balance in life. It reminds me of another law. If you have a real animal, guess what? There's a law. You have to feed your animal before you feed yourself. You know that? You know that? There's a law in Torah. It's actually in it's from the Parsha 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
I
read that.
Yeah, but let's conclude here with this beautiful idea. To be a Jew is to have balance. We have to always make sure that we're in charge of the physicality, not the physicality in charge of us. And the Torah mitzvahs between blessings and kosher and speaking words of Torah and praying in the morning before we eat. All of these are the Torah's methods of making sure we can properly keep this balance, that we again we eat in order to live, not that we live in order to eat. I'll hold it there.
Thank you so much.
It's a good thing right before the holidays and all the food coming up, right? So fasting too. And anyone who is joining us from the online community, thank you for listening. I owe one note. I should say this here. Next week, I do not believe, I'm sorry for the late notice, but we have a family simcha next week, and because of that, we have some people coming in town. I think we will not be able to meet next Tuesday. So I'll confirm that with an email. But I do not believe we have lunch and learn next Tuesday. Everyone will resume afterwards. And again, thanks to Nissan Communications for hosting today's program. Everyone have a good week.
Thank you.
You're tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.